Hello everyone, welcome to the part 2 of NEET 2020 chemistry paper discussion. So we are looking at the questions from set G5. In part 1 we have covered questions 1 to 25. In this we will be covering from question 26 onwards. Now those who have not yet looked at the first part video, the link for that is given in the description below. You can probably take a look at it. Okay, so we'll start with question number 26. This we can say is a question based on the periodic classification of elements, where we are looking at the nature of oxides. Okay, so in column 1 we are given the oxides, and column 2 we have the nature. We have to match, we have to find what is the appropriate match. So what is A? In column 1 we have A is carbon monoxide. So carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide, these are the two oxides of carbon. So carbon dioxide is acidic, it will form the weak acid, carbonic acid, when it is dissolved in water, whereas carbon monoxide is neutral. So what about carbon monoxide? Is a neutral oxide. So generally when we have the p block elements, right, when they form multiple oxides, higher the amount of the oxygen content, the acidic nature is going to be increasing. So that is what we will see in most of the examples. Even if you look at starting from nitrous, N2O, nitrous oxide, right? So N2O will be what? Neutral. So as you keep going, so when you go to N2O5, this will be what? A highly acidic oxide. So as the oxygen content is increasing, so we will see that the acidic nature of the oxides also will be increasing. Okay, so carbon monoxide is what? It is neutral. So A should be mapped to 2. So A should be mapped to 2. Okay, so when we say A is mapped to 2, right, I think we got our answer, because only one option is there where A is matching to 2. Check it. That is option 1. So like this, right, now if you are able to clearly identify one matching, we will be able to get the right answer. We don't even need to look at the others. But still we will go on. If you look at barium oxide, right, barium is what? It is the second group element, barium oxide. Okay, it will be what? Basic in nature. So B will be matched to 1. Then Al2O3, so it's an aluminum oxide and zinc oxide. They are what? Amphoteric in nature. They will react with both acids as well as bases. Then Cl2O7, what is Cl2O7? It is the anhydride of perchloric acid. So when you dissolve this in water, what we are going to get? HClO4, perchloric acid. Okay, so Cl2O7 will be what? Acidic in nature. So what is the correct match? A is matched to 2 and B is matched to 1. C, aluminum oxide, is what? Amphoteric, matched to 4. And D is what? Cl2O7, which is acidic, is matched to 3. Okay, so the correct answer is option 1. Next, we have a question based on the basic concepts of chemistry, the mole concept part. So which one of the following has maximum number of atoms? So when they give a question like this, right, we have to be careful. So what they're asking what is the substance that has got maximum number of atoms. So look at it. 1 gram of magnesium. What is the atomic mass of magnesium? 24. Okay, so here when we want to find number of moles of magnesium atoms, what will be the number of moles of magnesium atoms? Given mass, which is 1 gram, divided by the gram atomic mass, 24 grams, which is what? 1 by 24. Okay, that is the number of moles of magnesium atoms. Okay, then we'll go to oxygen. What is the oxygen given amount? 1 gram. What is the atomic mass of oxygen? 16. So number of moles of oxygen atoms. So everything we are finding about atoms. 1 gram divided by what is the gram atomic mass of oxygen? Here we will not divide this by molecular mass of oxygen. We will divide this by what? Gram atomic mass. So it will be what? 1 by 16 moles of oxygen atoms will be there. Okay. Then option 3 is what? 1 gram of lithium. What is the lithium atomic mass? It is 7. So number of moles of lithium atoms. What will be the number of moles of lithium atoms? 1 gram divided by the gram atomic mass of lithium, which is 1 by 7. Last option is what? 1 gram of silver. So number of moles of silver atoms. What is it going to be? The given mass divided by the gram atomic mass, 108, which is 1 by 108. So if you see all these places, the numerator is same 1. Okay, so which fraction is going to be higher? Wherever the denominator is less. This is basic mathematics, right? Wherever the denominator is less, that fraction is going to be higher. Here you see denominator 24, 16, 7, 108. Where the denominator is least? In case of lithium, the denominator is least. Means what? This value is going to be highest. Means the number of moles of atoms. Number of moles of atoms. If you multiply this with Avogadro number, right? Number of moles of atoms. You have to multiply this with what? Avogadro number. So that you will get the total number of atoms. Okay. So number of moles of atoms is highest means what? The number of atoms also will be highest, because all that we are going to do is, if you want to find what is the total number of atoms of lithium, right, what we are going to do, 1 by 7 into Avogadro number, that is the total number of atoms of lithium. So that will be the one that will have maximum number of atoms. So what is the correct answer for this? Option 3 is the right answer. Next we will go to question number 28. The reaction between benzaldehyde and acetophenone. So what is benzaldehyde? So we have benzaldehyde and acetophenone. Okay. In the presence of dilute sodium hydroxide is known as. So what is this reaction? It is basically the condensation reaction. So the condensation reaction. So what do we call it as? We will call it as the aldol condensation. But here we are looking at the condensation reaction between what? Between an aldehyde, which is the benzaldehyde, and another molecule, which is acetophenone. So we call it as what? Cross aldol condensation. So what is cross aldol condensation? It is a condensation reaction between two different molecules of either the aldehyde or ketone. So in the presence of an protic solvent. So usually the protic solvents will be what? The water or alcohol. So here we are using what? The dilute sodium hydroxide. So what will be happening in this reaction? We will not get into the details of the mechanism, but here we can see. So we have the benzaldehyde and this is the acetophenone in the presence of dilute sodium hydroxide. Right. First the carbonyl compound that has got alpha hydrogens. So here you can see benzaldehyde. This is the alpha carbon, right? Alpha carbon, no hydrogens. This does not have any alpha hydrogens. Only this acetophenone has got alpha hydrogens. Okay, the carbonyl compound that has alpha hydrogens, it will be able to form carbene ion. It will be able to form the carbene ion. So carbene ion will attack the benzaldehyde. Okay, so as a result, we will be getting what? First we will be getting beta hydroxy. In this case, what we are getting? We are getting beta hydroxy ketone. Okay, so generally we will get what? Beta hydroxy aldehydes or beta hydroxy ketones. In this case, we are getting beta hydroxy ketone. And this, on losing water, dehydration, we are going to be getting what? We will be getting the conjugated structure of the double bond and the carbonyl double bond. Okay, so this is the final compound. So what do we call the reaction as? We will be calling it as the cross aldol condensation. So what is the correct answer for this? It is option 3. Okay. So we'll go on to the next question, question number 29. A tertiary butyl carbocation. What is the tertiary butyl carbocation? Means carbon which is bonded to 3 methyl groups with an electron deficit site. This is the tertiary butyl carbocation. And secondary butyl carbocation. What do you mean by secondary butyl carbocation? Okay, so carbocation for the butyl where the deficit site is on a secondary carbon. This is the secondary butyl carbocation. Okay, so here tertiary butyl carbocation is more stable than secondary butyl carbocation. They themselves are giving that no, it is more stable. Means what they are saying, this is more stable in terms of the stability. They are asking what is the reason for that. See here, if you look at it, right, the stability of the carbocations is explained based upon two phenomena. Either the plus I effect of the groups attached, or by using the hyperconjugation. So these are the two phenomena that can explain the stability of the carbocations. Okay, so here if you see methyl groups attached, so the tertiary butyl has got 3 methyl groups attached. 3 methyl groups, they will contribute to what? They will be contributing in terms of the plus I effect. But here also we have a methyl and then ethyl. We have a methyl group and then ethyl. So methyl also will contribute for plus I, and ethyl also will be contributing in terms of plus I. Ethyl group will be having a more plus I effect than methyl group. Okay, so here the stability explanation based on the plus I effect of the alkyl groups. Here tertiary butyl carbocation has got 3 methyl groups. Secondary butyl carbocation has got 1 methyl and then 1 ethyl group attached. So we will not be able to conclusively explain the stability of higher stability of the tertiary butyl carbocation based upon just the plus I effect. Okay, so what is the effect that we will be able to look at? The other one is the hyperconjugation. So what is hyperconjugation? Typically, if you look at it, right, like you can see we are having the tertiary butyl carbocation representation here. So we can see this is the deficit carbon. It is bonded to 3 methyl groups. Okay, one methyl group we are representing with 3 hydrogen bonds clearly demarcated. So here, if the bond pair of electrons of the carbon hydrogen bond, they are used for forming a bond between these two carbons, right? That phenomena is what we call as hyperconjugation or the no bond resonance. What do we call it as? Hyperconjugation or no bond resonance. As a result of it, what we will be seeing is like this. So we'll have 2 methyl groups, a double bond, one hydrogen, other hydrogen will be left out without any bonding. That is why it is called as what? No bond resonance. Okay. So here the number of hyperconjugation structures is determined by the number of alpha hydrogens. What do you mean by alpha hydrogen? The carbon that is adjacent to the deficit carbon. So this is the deficit carbon. Adjacent is what? This is alpha. Here this is also alpha, this is also alpha. We have 3 alpha carbons here. The hydrogens attached to alpha carbon are called as what? Alpha hydrogens. Okay. The number of alpha hydrogens, right, will be resulting in that many number of hyperconjugation structures, like every time. So here this hydrogen can be giving this hydrogen. So more the number of alpha hydrogens we have, more the number of hyperconjugation structures we can represent. Means that is going to be resulting in more hyperconjugation effect and stability. Just like resonance, right? When we are able to draw more number of resonance structures means what? More delocalization of the charge and hence more stability. Same way hyperconjugation also, what is the principle? More the number of hyperconjugation structures we can draw, more will be the stability. So if you look at in terms of comparison, right, this is what the secondary butyl carbocation. You can see this is an alpha carbon, this is an alpha carbon. Here we have 2 hydrogens, here we have 3. Totally what is it? 5. Whereas in this case, right, what are we having? Look at it. This is an alpha, this is an alpha, this is an alpha. Here we have 3, here we have 3, here we have 3. So what are we observing? In case of the secondary butyl carbocation, we have 5 alpha hydrogens. Means what we will be having? We will be having 5 hyperconjugation structures. Okay. Whereas in the case of the tertiary butyl carbocation, we will be having how many alpha hydrogens? 9 alpha hydrogens. Means what? We can draw 9 hyperconjugation structures. So what is the effect that explains the stability of tertiary butyl carbocation over the secondary butyl carbocation? It is the hyperconjugation. Okay. Now we'll move on to the next question. Question number 30. This is a sort of a theoretical question based on the properties of the carbon monoxide. So which of the following is not correct about the carbon monoxide? So look at what is statement 1. So we have to go through each of the statements, then only we can conclude the answer. Okay, what is statement 1? It reduces the oxygen carrying ability of the blood. So carbon monoxide will combine with the hemoglobin to form what? A more stable carboxyhemoglobin. Carboxyhemoglobin will be more stable substance, and thereby it will reduce the oxygen carrying ability of the blood overall. So this is a correct statement. Okay, what about statement 2? The carboxyhemoglobin, where we have the hemoglobin bound to carbon monoxide, is less stable than oxyhemoglobin. No, carboxyhemoglobin is more stable. That is why it will be difficult to remove the carbon monoxide. Whereas in the case of oxygen, right, generally what happens in the respiratory system is the oxygen binding to the hemoglobin will be determined by the factors like temperature and the partial pressure of oxygen, etc. So here the binding ability of the oxygen will be very less in comparison to the binding ability of the carbon monoxide. So carboxyhemoglobin will be more stable than oxyhemoglobin. So we are looking for what? The incorrect. So what is the incorrect one? Second one is incorrect. Okay. What about 3? It is produced due to incomplete combustion. Yes. If you have complete combustion means we will get what? Carbon dioxide we will get, right? More oxidized form. It forms carboxyhemoglobin. This is also correct. So what is the incorrect one? Option 2 is the incorrect. Next we have a question, biomolecules. So I think, in fact, this is the second question that we are getting in this paper on biomolecules. Which of the following is a basic amino acid? In fact, in biology paper, same 2020, right? We have a similar question. Okay, which of the following is a basic amino acid? So what will be a basic amino acid? Generally, when we look at amino acids, right, in terms of the nature, so when the amino acids are having equal number of amino groups and carboxyl groups, we will be calling it as what? Neutral. So if the amino groups are more, then it will be what? Basic. If the carboxyl groups are more, it will be what? Acidic. Here we are given options: alanine, tyrosine, lysine and serine. So usually if you have to answer these kind of questions, right, there is no other way that we have to look at either the structures of these compounds, or we have to remember the classification. Okay. So if you look at lysine, right, lysine will have more number of amino groups. You can see lysine is having how many amino groups? 2 amino groups. How many carboxyl groups? Only 1. So number of amino groups is more. Means what? This is going to be what? Basic. That is what we are looking for, right? Whereas if you look at alanine, so alanine will have what? 1 amino group and 1 carboxyl. Okay. Tyrosine. Okay. So tyrosine also will have what? 1 amino and then 1 carboxyl. Serine. Serine also will have what? 1 amino group and then 1 carboxyl group. So the only one that is having 2 amino groups is what? Lysine, and that is going to be the basic. We'll move on to question number 32. Urea reacts with water to form A. So urea is reacting with water to form the compound A, which will decompose to form B. B, when passed through Cu2 plus aqueous, D blue color solution C is formed. What is the formula for the C? So this is a very standard question. I mean, even if we do not know what will be A, B, because here the context is not about finding what is A and what is B. I mean, we'll take a look at it, what will be A and what will be B. But the moment we hear that a gas is passed through copper 2 plus cupric ion solution and you are getting deep blue color. So what is the reason for that? It is because of the complex formed with the ammonia. The copper 2 plus ions will be forming a complex with the ammonia. That is the reason for the deep blue color. Okay. So if you look at where we will be able to get the ammonia, we will be able to get the ammonia from urea. Of course, we have first urea reacting with A to form, urea reacting with water to form A. Then A will decompose to give us B. So this B must be what? The ammonia gas. B should be what? Ammonia gas. So look at this. What is going to happen when urea? What is the urea formula? NH2CO NH2. In fact, this is the first organic compound to be synthesized inside the laboratory. Okay. So urea, when it is reacting with water, it will form ammonium carbonate, which is thermally less stable. When we decompose it, right, what we are going to get? We will see the liberation of the ammonia gas. So A is what? Ammonium carbonate, and B is what? Ammonia gas. B, when we pass it through solution of cupric ions, we will get the blue colored solution. Okay. Cu NH3 4 times 2 plus. So what is the formula for the C complex? It is option 1. Next we will move on to question number 33. This is a question based on the Dalton's law of partial pressures. A mixture of N2 gas and argon are in a cylinder which contains 7 grams of nitrogen, 8 grams of argon. Okay. If the total pressure of the mixture of the gases is 27 bar, the partial pressure of N2 is how much? Here what they are giving us is atomic mass of nitrogen is given, atomic mass of argon is given. So by the way, argon is what? Monoatomic. What about nitrogen? Diatomic. Means the molecular weight of nitrogen gas will be what? 2 atoms are there? No. So 14 plus 14 is what? 28 grams. Okay. Argon is monoatomic gas. So if you look at, we know what is the amount of nitrogen, what is the amount of argon. So what we can do? We can find what is the number of moles of nitrogen gas. Number of moles means what? Given mass, which is 7 grams, divided by molecular mass. We are looking at the number of moles of nitrogen gas. What will be the molecular mass? 28 grams, right? Means what? 7 by 28, 1 by 4 means what? 0.25. What about the number of moles of argon? Given mass, which is 8, divided by what is the argon is monoatomic, right? So molecular weight is same as the atomic weight, which is 40. So 8 by 40 means what? 1 by 5, which is 0.25. So what is the total number of moles in the container? 0.45. Because we require to have the mole fraction, right? So what does the Dalton's law of partial pressure say when you have mixture of gases? Partial pressure of any gas. In this case, we are looking at the partial pressure of nitrogen. Partial pressure of nitrogen will be equal to what? Mole fraction of nitrogen, chi. Chi is the symbol that we use to represent it, right? So chi N2 into the total pressure. Okay. So what is the mole fraction of nitrogen? Number of moles of nitrogen is what? 0.25 divided by total number of moles is what? 0.45 into what is the total pressure they gave us? What is it? 27 bar. So 0.25 divided by 0.45. So which means what? If you multiply numerator by 100, denominator by 100, what is it? 25 by 45. Cancel 5, we will get 5 by 9. So 9 ones are, 9 threes are. What is the answer? 15 bar. So what will be the partial pressure of nitrogen gas? It will be how much? 15 bar. This is a straight question. All we are doing is just getting the number of moles of nitrogen, number of moles of argon, finding the mole fraction of nitrogen, apply the Dalton's law of partial pressures. That is it. Next, we will move on to question number 34. Identify the correct statement from the following. So look at the statements. What is statement 1? Blister copper has blistered appearance due to evolution of CO2. No, it is because of what? The evolution of SO2. Okay, so the impurity, the sulfide form of impurity present in the copper, right? It will release SO2, and that is the reason for the formation of the blisters on the surface of the copper. Okay, so here we are looking for what the correct statement means. This is not correct. Statement 2 is what? Vapor phase refining is carried out for nickel by Van Arkel method. No, nickel is what? Nickel is Mond's process, where we will be forming nickel tetracarbonyl. So when CO is passed over nickel, right? What we are going to get? Nickel tetracarbonyl. That is what? Mond's process. Van Arkel process is for what? It is for the titanium. Van Arkel method is for what? Titanium. Okay, so this is also not correct. Pig iron can be molded into variety of shapes. So pig iron, which contains roughly about 4% carbon content. So this has got a high carbon content, okay, as an impurity, and this will be used for making variety of shapes and moldings, etc. So this is in fact correct. Option 4 is what? Wrought iron is an impure iron with 4% carbon content. This is incorrect. The carbon content of wrought iron will be very less. So blister copper is formed because of the evolution of not CO2 but because of SO2. Van Arkel method is for what? Titanium. Nickel, it is the Mond's process, where we will be forming nickel tetracarbonyl. Pig iron is used for making of the moldings and shapes, etc. Wrought iron contains very low carbon content. Okay, so it will be less than even 0.1%. So less than 0.1%. Okay, so this is about so what is the we are looking for what the correct, what is the correct one? Option 3 will be the correct one. Next we have a question on equilibrium, the del G naught and equilibrium constant relation. Okay, what is it? Hydrolysis of sucrose is given by the following reaction. What is the reaction? Sucrose plus water is giving us what? Glucose and fructose. Okay, if the equilibrium constant Kc is what? 2 into 10 power 13 at 300 Kelvin, the value of del G naught for the reaction. So we need to find what? We need to find what is the del G naught. So if you look at it, right, what is the relation we have? The delta G for a chemical reaction will be equal to what? Del G naught plus RT ln Q. Okay, so Q is what? Reaction. Q is the reaction quotient. Q is what? Q is the reaction quotient. Okay, so if you are reaching equilibrium means del G will be equal to what? 0. Del G will be equal to 0, and the Q value will become equal to what? Equilibrium constant. So if you rearrange means what you are going to have? Look at it. We will be having del G naught will be equal to what? Minus RT ln K equilibrium. We will just bring the del G naught to the left side. So look at this. What is the relation? Del G naught will be equal to minus RT ln K equilibrium. So here we are not even supposed to substitute and get the final answer. We just have to look at the expression and compare. So in this formula, just look at it. R is what? 8.314 joule per mole per Kelvin, and temperature is what? 300 Kelvin into ln, what is the equilibrium constant? 2 into 10 power 13. So look at this. What is the correct expression we have? Option 4, minus 8.314 joule per mole per Kelvin into temperature is 300 Kelvin into ln K equilibrium. What is K equilibrium value? 2 into 10 power 13. It's a straightforward question. We just have to remember the relation between del G naught and equilibrium constant. Next we have question number 36. This is a question based on the molecular orbital theory. Okay, so what is this question? Identify a molecule which does not exist. So in molecular orbital theory, right, so we'll talk about the bond order. So bond order will be equal to the number of electrons in the bonding orbitals minus number of electrons in the anti-bonding orbitals divided by 2. So if the bond order is equal to 0, then those molecules do not exist. In fact, in the NCERT textbook itself, right, we have this example. Okay, so what is it? Helium-2. So if you look at the bond order, what is the bond order value? Number of electrons in the bonding orbitals minus number of electrons in the anti-bonding orbitals divided by 2. So the molecular orbitals, there will be a difference in the order. So up to total 14 electrons we have one order, and beyond that we'll have another order. So if you look at the example that we're talking about, which is the helium-2, right? So 1s, sigma 1s and sigma star 1s. So sigma 1s will have 2 electrons because helium-2, each helium atom has got 2 electrons, totally 4 electrons, right? So sigma 1s will have 2 electrons, sigma star 1s will have 2 electrons. What is the number of electrons in bonding orbitals? 2. Number of electrons in anti-bonding orbitals? 2. So 2 minus 2 is what? 0. So that is the reason why the bond order will be equal to 0. So what is the answer for this? It is helium-2. So since the bond order is 0, so what does it technically mean? That there will be no bond that will exist between these two helium atoms. Okay. Now if you look at the others, say for example O2, this is a very popular example that we will be referring to in terms of even the paramagnetic properties of O2, etc. So we'll have sigma 1s, sigma star 1s, this is the order, sigma 2s, sigma star 2s, then this is coming after 14 electrons, is coming after 14 electrons. Okay, the difference will be up to 14 electrons we'll have pi 2py and pi 2pz. They will be having a lower energy than sigma 2px. Okay, but after 14 electrons it will be sigma 2px will have a lower energy than the pi 2py and pi 2pz level. Okay, so sigma 1s will have 2 electrons, sigma star 1s, totally O2 means 8 plus 8, 16 electrons. Sigma star 1s will have 2 electrons, sigma 2s will have 2 electrons, sigma star 2s will have 2 electrons, sigma 2px will have 2 electrons, pi 2py will have 2 electrons. These are degenerate. Pi 2pz will have 2 electrons. Then after that pi star 2py and pi star 2pz. Then comes sigma star 2px. That is the order. Okay. Before up to 14 electrons means this will be the reverse. These two will be interchanged. Okay. So O2, as per this arrangement, right, we'll see that there will be 2 unpaired electrons in the pi star orbital. That is the reason why the O2 will have paramagnetic nature. In fact, the molecular orbital theory is the only theory that supports how O2 can have paramagnetic nature. Okay. Now here we are looking at what is the bond order. So what will be the bond order? We have to count what is the number of electrons in bonding orbital. So look at this: 2 plus 2 4, 4 plus 2 6, then 6 plus 4 is 10. Okay, so we'll have 10 electrons in the bonding orbitals, minus anti-bonding will be 6. So 4 by 2, which is equal to 2. That is why O2, what is the bond order? 2. Now even if you look at C2, right, C2, this is total number of electrons is 12. So we can see the order. The order will be what? The sigma 2px will be here. Sigma 2px will have a higher energy than the pi 2py and pi 2pz. We can see the order clearly here. Okay, so first what we are filling? Sigma 1s, then sigma star 1s, then sigma 2s, sigma star 2s, then pi 2py and pi 2pz. This is degenerate level. So they will get 2 electrons each. Totally count. So 2 plus 2 is 4, 6, then 8, then 4, 12. Okay, so here number of electrons in bonding orbitals is what? Here 2, totally 4. So 8 minus anti-bonding is 4. So 8 minus 4 by 2 means what? 4 by 2, which is 2. So C2 also, what is the bond order? 2. If you look at Li2, so sigma 1s, sigma star 1s, then sigma 2s. So number of electrons in bonding orbitals is 4, anti-bonding is 2. So 4 minus 2 by 2 is what? 2 by 2, which is equal to 1. What is the bond order? So where the bond order is 0, it is in the case of the helium-2. That is why this molecule does not exist. Then we have question number 37. An increase in the concentration of the reactants of a reaction leads to change in. So if you're increasing concentration, of the reactant, what is going to happen? Concentration, if you're increasing, right, what is going to happen? So if you're looking at the collision frequency in the collision theory, so chemical kinetics, right, we'll explain the rate of the reaction either based upon the Arrhenius theory or based upon the collision theory. So collision theory talks about the reaction which is happening through collision between the reactant molecules. So here in collision theory, right, so we'll explain the rate of reaction. So rate of reaction will be equal to what? Will be equal to the collision frequency Z into the factor e to the power of minus EA by RT. So this factor represents what? This factor represents the fraction of the molecules having energy more than the threshold energy. Okay, so we'll talk about it, but here looking at the definition of collision frequency, what is a collision frequency? It is the number of collisions that are happening per second per unit volume of the reaction mixture. So if you take per unit volume, the number of collisions happening per second. So if you increase concentration, means what happens? If you consider a specific volume, if you increase concentration, means what? Number of particles in that volume is increasing, means what? The collision frequency Z is going to be increasing. So Z depends upon the concentration, means what is the one that is going to be changing here? It is the collision frequency. Collision frequency will be changing. What about the other terms? If you look at the reaction energy map, right, so we have the reactants, okay, that are leading to products. We'll take an example of hydrogen plus iodine gases combining to form HI. Okay, so the energy level of reactants and energy level of products, the difference between the energy level of the reactants and the products, okay, so which is what we call as the heat of the reaction. So what is it called as? Heat of reaction. So this has got nothing to do with the concentration of the reactant. What is this? In terms of the molecular energy level, the energy difference between the reactants and the products, that is what we'll be calling as the heat of the reaction. That is the energy difference. What is activation energy? It is the energy difference between the activated complex energy level and the reactants. Okay, so here also we'll talk about the activation energy for the forward reaction and activation energy for the backward reaction, but generally activation energy will be referring to as what? The activation energy for the forward reaction. Here also what we see is that it is the difference between the energy level of the activated complex and the reactant. So this also is not going to be affected by the concentration. Okay, heat of reaction is not affected, activation energy is also not affected. What about the threshold energy? Total energy that is required to form the activated complex, means that is the energy of the reactants plus the activation energy. This is what we call as the threshold energy. Threshold energy means what? The energy that a particular reactant molecule must possess in order to lead into the formation of product. It is the reactant energy, because the gap between reactant energy and the activated complex energy is what we call as the energy of activation. The actual total energy value that a substance must possess in order to go through the reaction process, means it will be the origin energy of the reactants plus this much. That is what we will call as the threshold energy. Okay, so here what is the one that is going to be? So I'll just erase this part. We can see the definition. So what is the definition of the threshold energy? It is the activation energy value plus the energy of the reactants. So here this also is not going to be affected because of the concentration change. So what is the one that is going to be affected? It is the collision frequency. Okay, so as per the collision theory, the collision frequency multiplied by the factor of the molecule that possess the threshold energy, that is what is the e to the power of minus EA by RT. Okay, so that will be leading to collisions. Okay, so this is what is the basic idea of the collision theory. So the correct answer for this is what? Will be the collision frequency part. Next we have question number 38. This is based on the Woods reaction. So what is Woods reaction? Alkyl halide. When we treat this in the presence of sodium and dry ether, so we will be able to form the higher alkanes. So which of the following alkane cannot be made in a good yield by the Woods reaction? So which of them cannot be made in a good yield by the Woods reaction? So generally when we look at the Woods reaction, right? So Woods reaction, what we are going to be getting? So we will be getting symmetrical alkanes. Like if you have RCl, so RCl is going to, two entities of RCl will combine with sodium to give rise to what? And higher alkane. So alkane will have double the number of carbon atoms. Okay, we can see it is what? Symmetrical. So the alkanes are going to be what? Symmetrical alkanes. Okay, so this is what we will be able to see in terms of the Woods reaction. And we also have mixed Woods reaction, which is two different type of alkyl halides. So when we have two different types of alkyl halides, right, in the mixed Woods reaction, there will be a variety of products that can be formed, because when we have two different alkyl halides, we can see what is going to happen. We can have a reaction between RCl and R-Cl. We can have a reaction between RCl and another molecule of RCl. So this will give us what is the alkane? We will get RR dash. This will give us what? RR. This will give us what? R dash R dash. We will get a mixture of products. Okay, so one product we will not be able to get in good yield. So mixed Woods reaction, right, is the one that is used to get the asymmetrical alkanes. But the problem with that is you will get a mixture of products. You are not going to be getting a product with good yield. So here if you look at it, right, the given options, 2,3-dimethyl butane. What is 2,3-dimethyl butane? So we'll just write down the structures and see. So here obviously the thing is what? Whichever is asymmetrical, right, whichever alkane is asymmetrical, that is the one which we will not be able to produce with good yield. And we know that even methane cannot be prepared from the Woods reaction, because methane contains how many carbons? Just one carbon, right? So methane cannot be prepared from the Woods reaction. So 2,3-dimethyl butane. So means what? 2,3-dimethyl butane. I am representing the skeletal structure. Okay, so we can see, is it symmetrical? Yes, it is symmetrical. Means what? This can be prepared from the Woods reaction. So if you take CH3, CHCl, if you take this alkyl halide and perform the Woods reaction, we are going to get what? 2,3-dimethyl butane. What about N-heptane? N-heptane means what? We'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, totally 7. Is it symmetric? It is not symmetric. It is what? Asymmetric molecule. So what is this? Is it an asymmetric molecule? Means they cannot prepare this from the Woods reaction. What about N-butane? 4 carbons, symmetric. N-hexane, 6 carbons, symmetric. Okay, the one that is asymmetric is what? N-heptane. That is the reason why we cannot obtain this from the normal Woods reaction. Okay, next we have a named test. What is it? Carbyl amine test. Okay, which of the following amine will give the carbyl amine test? So what kind of substances will give carbyl amine test? Either we have aliphatic or aromatic primary amines. Aliphatic or aromatic primary amines, they will be able to give the carbyl amine test. Okay, so if you look at the examples, right, we have ethylamine, which is treated with chloroform, and the presence of alcoholic OH. What are we going to get? We will be getting ethyl isocyanate. Okay, similarly if you have aniline, so in fact in this question what are we having? Option 4 is what? Aniline, chloroform with alcoholic OH. We are going to get what? Phenyl isocyanate. So the carbyl amine test will be given by what? Either aliphatic or aromatic primary amines. We can see option 1, this is not a primary amine because nitrogen is bonded to 2 carbons. This is not a this is a tertiary amine. Okay, this is what? Secondary amine. So only primary amine is option 4. It's a straight question. Okay, so if you understand the condition on carbyl amine test, we will be able to answer this. Next we have question number 40. On electrolysis of dilute sulfuric acid using platinum electrodes. Platinum electrodes are what? These are the neutral electrodes. They themselves do not participate in the reaction. Okay, so on electrolysis of dilute sulfuric acid using platinum electrode, the product obtained at the anode. See what happens at the anode. So at the anode, right, so dilute sulfuric acid means what? We will be having sulfate ions as well as water. because dilute solution means we are looking at the solution of sulfuric acid in water, right? So we'll have SO4 2 minus ions as well as water. Now at anode, what must happen? Anode means that is the site for the oxidation. Okay, so anion, which is the sulfate ion, it will go to the anode. But anode, there must be oxidation. So whichever has got a lower reduction potential, that would undergo oxidation, preferential oxidation, right? So if you have at the anode, there are multiple ions or species available, whichever has got a lower reduction potential, because the lower reduction potential means what? That will easily undergo oxidation. So that would get oxidized in preference. Okay, so here if you look at the sulfate ions, instead of sulfate ions, right, the water will undergo oxidation, because the reduction potential of the water will be lower than the sulfate ions. This we can look at in the standard reduction potential series also. And what would happen as a result of it? When water is undergoing oxidation, it will release oxygen gas and H plus ions, and of course electrons, because it is what? Oxidation, losing electrons. So what is the gas that is released at the anode? It is the oxygen gas. Why is it happening? Because water is undergoing oxidation, preferential oxidation is happening. Okay, in comparison to SO4 2 minus, water has got lower reduction potential, so this will undergo what? It will undergo oxidation in preference than the sulfate ions. Next we have a straight question based on redox reaction chapter. This is on the oxidation number change. What is the change in oxidation number of carbon in the following reaction? What is the reaction? We have to just focus our eyes on carbon. So where is here carbon? Methane. So there is a reaction where methane is leading to the formation of CCl4, carbon tetrachloride. So what is the change of oxidation number of carbon? Remember, when we look at the method to find the oxidation number, we will use the sum rule method. What is the method that we use to find the oxidation number? It is the sum rule method. Okay. With regard to hydrogen, what are the rules that we have? When hydrogen is with a non-metal, right, hydrogen will be having an oxidation state of +1. Okay, so in the CH4, carbon is a non-metal, so hydrogen will be having what is the oxidation state of hydrogen? It will be +1. Okay, now look at this. In CH4, we will first find what is the oxidation state of carbon. So let us say X is the oxidation state of carbon, plus 4 hydrogens are there. Each hydrogen we will take it as +1. Why? Because hydrogen is present along with the non-metals. Okay, so X plus 4 into 1, that will be equal to what? Total, it's not an ion, so total sum will be equal to 0. Okay, so X will be equal to -4, means in CH4, what is the oxidation number of carbon? It is -4. Whereas when it comes to CCl4, each chlorine, what is the oxidation number of chlorine? -1. So X is carbon, plus 4 into -1 is equal to 0, which means X will be coming as what? +4. So what is the change we are seeing here? Oxidation number of carbon is changing from -4 to +4. Okay, in CH4 it will be -4, in CCl4 it will be what? +4. Next we'll go to question number 42. Anisole. What is anisole? Anisole is C6H5OCH3. Okay, so anisole on cleavage with HI will be giving rise to what? So anisole, when we react this with HI, so the H plus of the HI, so HI will dissociate to give us H plus and I minus. Okay, so the H plus will attack the oxygen, because oxygen is a nucleophile. Okay, because it has lone pair of electrons, and we can see the hydrogen H plus is added to the oxygen, and then through SN2 mechanism, right, the I minus will be able to substitute the group that is attached to the oxygen, that is attached to the methyl part. So as a result, what we are going to observe is the leaving entity will be what? It will be phenol, and the I minus will be attaching itself to the CH3 part. So what will be the final products? We will get phenol and CH3I. So what is the correct answer for this? It is option 4. We'll get phenol and then CH3I. Next we have question number 43. This is a theoretical question on the surface chemistry chapter. Okay, colloids basically. Measuring zeta potential. Zeta potential is also called as what? Electrokinetic potential, right? So measuring zeta potential is useful in determining which property of the colloidal solution. So what is zeta potential basically? When we look at a colloidal particle, okay, so it will form a charge layer. Okay, what kind of charge particles will be adsorbed on the surface of colloidal particles? There will be various factors that will influence. Okay, but what we will see is that there will be a charge layer of particles on the colloids, and since if say for example there is a positive layer of charge that is accumulated on the colloidal particles, the first layer of charge is what we call as generally the fixed layer. Okay, there will be an additional layer of opposite charge. There will be an additional layer of opposite charge of particles that will be surrounding, because if the colloidal particles are having a charge layer of plus, surrounding will be minus. So the potential difference between these two charge layers is what we call as the zeta potential. So what is it in colloidal solution? The potential difference between the fixed layer is the first layer of charge, and the diffused layer of opposite charge. Second layer will be also called as what? Diffused layer. Okay, that potential difference between these two layers is what we call as the zeta potential. Okay, and the charge and colloidal particles, what it essentially represents, or it supports the stability of the colloids. So what is charge in general supporting? It supports the stability of the colloids, because every colloidal particle in that given colloidal solution will have same type of charge. So as you see that the colloidal particles are having a similar type of charge, they will be repelled away, and then that will prevent the coagulation of particles. So the zeta potential value, right, it represents what? It represents the stability of the colloidal particles. Okay, so we'll move on to the next question. Question number 44. This is the theoretical question. Paper chromatography is an example of. So what does paper chromatography represent? So what is paper chromatography? It's basically a type of partition chromatography where we'll use the chromatography paper. Okay, so if you look at there are, descending type of paper chromatography and ascending type of paper chromatography, depending upon where we will keep the solution. So what we see here is an ascending type. So we'll have the solution at the bottom, and we'll have the chromatography paper, and we'll see that the solution will be ascending through. So after a while, what we'll see at different layers, you will be able to see the demarcation of the colors being formed. So what is this? This is an example of partition chromatography, and it is also a little bit less expensive method. Next we have question number 45. Match the following and identify the correct option. So we have to match column 1 with the column 2. So what are these? In column 1 we are given the compounds, and column 2 we have either the characteristics or the description. So look at it. What is column 1? CO plus H2. Mixture of CO plus H2 is what we call as synthesis gas or syn gas, isn't it? So A should be matched to 3. A should be matched to 3. So we'll see that option 1, option 2 and option 4, all of them, they have A is matched to 3. Then temporary hardness of water is because of what? The bicarbonates of magnesium and calcium. So which means B should be matched to 1. So B should be matched to 1 means there is only one of them that is suiting. What is it? Option 4. So we got our answer. What is the answer for this? Option 4. So we don't even need to check the other two. But nevertheless, we'll look at option C is what? Diborane B2H6. Okay, so B2H6 is what? It is an electron deficit hydride. So even though it forms the banana bond complex where we'll have the 3-centered 2-electron bond, Okay, what will be there in B2H6? There will be 3-centered 2-electron bond, banana bonding, right? But still, this is an example of electron deficit molecule. The boron atoms, right? They will not be able to attain the octet structure. So C should be matched to what? C should be matched to 2. Okay, we can say C is in option C. Option 4, C is matched to what? 2. And H2O2. What is H2O2? Hydrogen peroxide. It will be having a non-planar structure. So if you look at the structure of H2O2, it will have a non-planar structure. Okay, so what is the correct answer for this? It is option 4, where CO plus H2 is the synthesis gas. Temporary hardness is because of the bicarbonates of magnesium and calcium. B2H6 is electron deficit hydride, and H2O2 will have a non-planar structure. Okay, so this is about the discussion of NEET 2020 paper, and we also have prior to 2019 and even including 2019, all the papers discussed chapter wise. Maybe we have given a link for those videos also in the description below. You can take a look at it, and if you have any queries, you can always feel free to comment on the chat box. We'll be able to respond to that. All the best.